Thank you. Okay, we conclude a series, Villains in the Bible, and we're concluding with an examination of Bilaam. I called him the mouth that roared. You'll see why within a few minutes. And throughout the series, we've been examining the idea of not just studying or examining villainy or wickedness for its own sake, but to try to draw some kind of positive lessons, at the very least by means of contrast. And sometimes it's an anti-hero. Sometimes we have to look for the silver linings of what's positive that we can take out of the lives and the narratives of the great villains of the Bible. But tonight, before we even get started with any narrative or with anything that our sages teach us about Bilaam, I want to talk for a few minutes about what I've come to call the absolute value theory of spirituality. And what I mean by that is simply this. There are people of very great potential, and God endowed human beings with free will. So when you're talented, when you have great potential, very often the same people who have the greatest capacity for evil also have the greatest capacity for good. And I just want to share with you some of the superlatives that our sages tell us about this biblical character Bilaam before we begin to understand what his villainy was and what, if anything, what kind of lessons we can take out of the evils of Bilaam. First, let's talk about some of the positives of Bilaam. Right towards the end of the Torah declares, "V'lokam navi b'Yisrael kamosha od." No prophet arose among the Israelites, among the Jewish people, ever again like Moshe, like Moses. And this was later codified. It's a dogma of our faith. It's something in the 13 principles of Maimonides. Tonight we have the Siddurim out, not the Chumashim, so we actually have the text available. I can show it to you inside. Take a look on page 179. Okay, these are the 13 principles of faith as articulated by Maimonides. He speaks of them at length in his classic works, Mar Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, and Yad HaChazaka, the Mighty Hand. But it was simplified and codified as things that you can say each day after davening. Parenthetically, this is where the custom in a lot of shuls after the service to sing Yigdal comes from. Because Yigdal is basically these 13 articles of faith set to poetry. I don't have time to compare the two prayers right now. If you're interested after the class, take a look on page 13 and you'll see how the Yigdal poem reiterates these principles of faith. And we'll look at principles number 6 and 7. I believe with a complete faith that all the words of the prophets are true. Okay? Number 7. I believe with a complete faith that the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him, was true, and that he was the father of the prophets, both those who preceded him and those who followed him. What he means by father of the prophets, what he means to say is that he was the supreme prophet. One of the litmus tests for a false prophet is a prophet that will come along and saying, I'm making a permanent amendment to the Torah as revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu. There is such a concept in prophecy called harasha. Harasha means a temporary suspension of halachic practice, most famous of which was when Elijah the prophet brought a sacrifice to God in what is today the city of Haifa, on Mount Carmel, when he was having a standoff with the Nevi'ei Baal, with the prophets of the cult of Baal. That was a harasha. That was not something that he was saying, a permanent amendment that now you can bring sacrifices both in Jerusalem and in Haifa. That's passable, and that's something that doesn't belie the truth of a prophet. But if a prophet is going to say that no more tzitzis, no more lighting candles Friday night, that's one of the signs of a false prophet, and it has to do with this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu was the supreme prophet. He was greater in prophecy both over the patriarchs who preceded him and all of the prophets who come after him. And again, it's based on this self-validating, if you will, proof text in the Torah itself. It's of L'kam Navi b'Yisrael k'Moshe. No prophet arose among the Jews like Moshe. To which our sages say yes, among the Israelites, among the Jews, no prophet ever arose as great as Moses. But among the other nations of the earth, there was a prophet as great as Moshe. Muhammad? Nostradamus? No, not according to our tradition. According to our tradition, the prophet who was Moshe's peer in prophecy was none other than Bilaam, the villain that we're examining tonight. Okay, so before we can fully appreciate what that means in terms of a compliment, of a superlative about Bilaam, I want to digress for a few moments and talk about two aspects of prophecy. Okay? Anyone know the nickname for this coming Shabbos? We have a Shabbos coming up as a special name. The Shabbos before Tisha B'Av has a special name. Anybody know? Huh? You know what the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av is called?
Yeah, Shabbos Nachmu.
Not Shabbos Nachmu. Why? Because the first words of the Haftarah that week is Nachmu. Well, the first words of the Haftarah this week is Chazon. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amotz. So Chazon is the name of this Shabbos. This Shabbos is called Shabbos Chazon. Chazon means a vision, to see something. Okay. So, throughout the Torah, throughout the whole biblical canon, there are generally two different words to describe what we normally call a prophet. A chozeh and a navi. Those are the two words in Hebrew. A chozeh speaks to the vision thing, speaks to the ability, the perception of the prophet. The things that a prophet can see, the things that a prophet can hear. Is it actual physical seeing, actual physical hearing? I don't know. You have to ask a prophet. I'm not one. I don't know what it means. But at least the metaphor, the way it comes through throughout the Torah is, it's a matter of seeing and hearing certain things. The other word in the Torah that describes a prophet is a navi. And Jewish etymologists, Hirsch, the Malbim mothers have pointed out that navi is etymologically related to the words in the verse, Boren Nivs Vasayim, he who created the murmuring of the lips. So the word navi refers to the communicative skills, the oratorical skills of a prophet. Right? And one of the great compliments that people used to say, critics used to say, about Dr. Martin Luther King is he thundered like an Old Testament prophet. Part of prophet, you see this again throughout the Torah, most notably by Moshe himself and by the prophet Jeremiah. They want to turn down their vocation, as it were. They want to deny their role as prophets because they say, we're not good speakers. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu, he had all kinds of different metaphors. I'm uncircumcised of lips. I have a heavy mouth. You know, the prophet Jeremiah says, I'm just a youth. I don't know how to speak. I don't know how to communicate the message. Okay? The clearest proof that the word Navi means a speaker is when Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to turn down his mission to the Egyptian Pharaoh. Okay? So God says to him, you do what you have to do. Your brother Aaron, he will be your Navi. What is that supposed to mean? It doesn't mean that he's going to see things for you. It means he'll be your spokesperson. He'll be the one to actually communicate the message to Pharaoh. Okay. So, simply put, when we talk about the supremacy of Moshe Rabbeinu and also of this character that we're studying tonight, Bilaam, so most commentaries say it speaks to both aspects. First of all, the way Moshe Rabbeinu's relative supremacy over the other prophets in terms of the vision of a prophet is stated. The words are, the fancy Aramaic words are, Aspaklaya ha-me'ira versus Aspaklaya she'ena me'ira. Okay? The glass, if you will, the looking glass through which Moshe saw his prophetic visions, the metaphor for it, it's a clear pane of glass. There's no distortion whatsoever. An aspaklaya she'ena me'ira, that already is an argument among the commentaries precisely what it means. Either means an opaque glass where you see shadows, you see forms, you see movements, but you don't have a 100% clear picture of what you're looking at. Or others learn that it's a mirror, where we know that in a mirror, right, things are reversed. What's on the right is on the left. Right? A lot of times ambulances will have the word ambulance spelled out backwards on the trunk, so that when you're looking at it, when the sirens are going, and you're looking at it in your rear view mirror, you see ambulance spelled out the correct way. Right? Mirrors invert and reverse things. So again, these are all metaphors, and again, this is talking to some of the greatest mystical experiences and secrets of the Torah and of the universe. I don't know 100% what it means, but essentially the contrast that they're trying to bring across from is the perfect fidelity. Today we have high-def TVs, right? The perfect fidelity of the picture. There's no distortion, and when there's no distortion, there's neither need nor room for interpretation. Basically, you just have to repeat the message exactly as you saw it. Okay? So we can assume that if we say that Bilaam was in fact Moshe Rabbeinu's peer in terms of prophecy, that he also had this tremendously sharp, crystal clear vision. At least Rabbi Shmuel Diskin, among others, understands it that way. And what's much more easy to understand just from the narrative, the story about Bilaam, which I'll tell you in a few moments, is the power of speech. Bilaam is basically a hitman for an ancient Near East king. He's hired to curse the Jewish people. Never comes to fruition, but that was his role, that was his job, that's what he was hired for. And his power of speech, the ability to just utter words that shouldn't be meaningless, that should obviously have some effect, this speaks to the power of a prophet as well. Prophets are great prayers. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu utters a few words on behalf of his sister, and his sister is cured of leprosy. Moshe Rabbeinu slays the Egyptian, according to one tradition, by pronouncing the ineffable name of God. That's all it took. Remember last week we were talking about Moshe Rabbeinu's opponents, Ztzl and Aviram, when he said, Rasha, lama saka re'echa, wicked man, why are you hitting your friend? So Ztzl's response is, Halahargeni ata omer, are you saying to kill me, like you did to the Egyptian? So the simple meaning is, are you planning to kill me, like you killed the Egyptian? But Rashi Adlok, and Rashi on the spot says that Ztzl was saying, are you going to kill me through speech, like you killed the Egyptian? You pronounced the word, and the guy fell away dead. So the idea to confer blessing or to confer curse just through the power of speech is something that we associate, with the miracle working, with the magical almost powers of a prophet. But it's really much more than that. When we talk about a prophet and oratorical abilities, we have to understand that really a prophet is the highest expression of humanity, of anyone's humanity. Because to be human means to be speech endowed. I've said this, I think, literally scores of times in my classes over here, but what can I tell you? It bears repetition. Famous Targum Onkelos, one of the earliest translations of the Torah, on the verse in the Genesis narrative, when it says, and God blew a soul into the nostrils of man, and he became Vayi Adam l'nefesh chaya. Now, if I was writing a translation of the Torah, most translators of the Torah say, nefesh chaya means a living soul, an animated soul. Targum Onkelos says, l'ruach mamalala, to a spirit that speaks, a speech-endowed spirit. What was unique when God created a human being, you could say a lot of unique aspects of a human being. An erect posture, endowed with an immortal soul, capable of free will. What the Targum Onkelos zeroes in on is communication, the ability to speak, the ability to connect with others outside of oneself through communication, through speech. So it's quite a compliment to Bilaam to say that he was Moshe Rabbeinu's peer as a prophet. Whether we mean the vision thing, whether we mean the speech thing, it's something that's obviously a great superlative. In researching this class, I came across an Avos de Rab Nosson, that's the Brisa on Pirkei Avos, on the ethics of our fathers, which I found shocking. There's a long list over there about various people throughout history who we have a tradition about them that noldu mohel, they were born circumcised. Parenthetically, again, part of our tradition is that the first man, Adam, was created without a foreskin, and the foreskin is something that developed after the fall of humanity, after the first sin. And there's a whole list over there of people who were born already circumcised. Moshe Rabbeinu was on that list as well. Bilaam is on that list too. Totally incongruous. Everyone else on the list is somebody who we associate with saintliness. And Bilaam is on the list too. It was Nolad Mohel. Another thing that shouldn't come as a surprise, didn't come as, this part didn't really come as, I didn't know it before, it didn't come as much of a surprise to me, especially after everything we've learned about prophecy, is that he was Medaber B'Lashon Kodesh. He spoke the holy tongue. Yeah? And the significance of that is that before the Tower of Babel, that was the only tongue. And it's the language with which Adam named the rest of creation. He called all the animals names. He was speaking Lashon HaKodesh. He was speaking biblical Hebrew, according to our tradition. So the fact that Bilaam, a non-Jew, was well-versed, not just in something called Hebrew, the language of the Hebrews, but what we call Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, again, speaks to his exalted spiritual level, for want of a better description. I don't have to apologize to it, it's clear. Bilaam to me is one of the great, let me finish this section, then I'll take questions. Is one of the great examples of this idea of the absolute value theory.
After the Babel of Torah.
What?
After the Babel of Torah, it was only Hebrew language.
Before. Right.
Of Torah.
Right.
Well, everybody's speaking.
Right, but he's living many, many generations after that. Okay. One of the things, this is going to be our main in-text study for tonight, is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that compares and contrasts not Bilaam with Moshe Rabbeinu, with the greatest of prophets, but Bilaam with Avraham Avinu, with Abraham the patriarch, first father of the Jewish people. Take a look. Perek Hey. Here, I believe it's Mishnah Chav Daled. In some it's Mishnah Yotes. Here I think it's Mishnah Chav Daled. Just give me a minute. Yeah. Take a look on page 579. Everyone have it? Mm-hmm. Page 579. 22. Towards the top of the page, where it's bracketed 22, Mishnah 22. Whoever has the following three traits is among the disciples of our forefather Abraham. And whoever has three different traits is among the disciples of the wicked Bilaam. Okay, let's stop for right now. I don't want to read what the three traits are. Okay? But the mere fact that we're contrasting Abraham with Bilaam speaks to the greatness of Bilaam. The Maharal says that the reason the Tana chose Avraham Avinu is because Avraham Avinu is the head, is the root of the Jewish people, and Bilaam, even though there's no patrilineal descent, there's no biological unity between him and the rest of humanity, but the fact that he was the greatest prophet among the non-Jewish nations of the earth make him basically the head. He had the most vital message. He contributed the most in a certain sense. He occupies a place for the balance of humanity that parallels the place that Abraham occupies for the Jewish people. So says the Derech Chaim, the commentary of the Maharal of Prague on Pirkei Avos. So what do I mean by the absolute value theory of spirituality? I mean as follows. Okay, this is pretty simple math. If it wasn't simple, I wouldn't be aware of it. But you know that you could write a greater than sign, right? And 1 is greater than -3, right? But the absolute value of -3 is greater than 1. Absolute value, if I remember my high school math correctly, means the number of spaces away from 0 that you are on the number line. And the absolute value is always related to a positive number. So even if you're a negative number, the absolute value of the negative number, pardon me?
It will be the same, only positive.
Exactly, right? So the idea being Okay? I'll try to explain it with a parable that was given in the Sefer Pachid Yitzchak. He says, try to imagine a military hierarchy. Okay? Everyone's a soldier in the same army. Whether you're a buck private or whether you're a 5-star general, whether you're a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staffs. You're soldiers. You're soldiers in the army. Okay? But if a buck private does or does not do his job, okay, the damage is basically localized. I didn't clean my rifle right. I didn't take my marksmanship lessons to heart. All right? What's the worst thing that that's going to happen? I'm going to get killed, and maybe the guy on the right and the left of me will get killed. If I do my job right, maybe I can kill or wound 3 or 4 members of the enemy army. All right? If a general is derelict in his duty, if a general makes a mistake in tactics or strategy, it can turn the tide of a major battle and sometimes the whole war. And conversely, if a general makes the right call in tactics or strategy, he can turn the tide of the war in the favor of his army. So the idea being that, kaviyachol, so to speak, God doled out various potentialities. And the potentialities in spirituality don't necessarily relate to intelligence or popularity. This is, again, what we call Sisrei Torah. These are, some of the most secret parts of the Jewish tradition. What my rank is, if you will, in the army. Okay, you don't like the army model. Use a symphony orchestra. Okay, am I the lead violin or am I the guy playing the little triangle in the back? Nobody really knows that. Okay, but in some of the historical figures, at least that we see throughout the Torah, throughout the biblical canon, so our tradition, our sages have maybe given us a little scope, a little insight into the relative rank of some people. So when you have a person like Bilaam, who gets compared to Moshe in prophecy, who gets compared to Abraham in terms of nation building, okay? We shouldn't think, well, how's that possible? I mean, we read in the Torah that the guy was a villain, the guy vacillated, the guy was a hired gun. He seems like little more than a hitman for the mafia. That's not the way to understand it. The way to understand it is that when you have great capacity for good, you also have great capacity for evil. Now, where we rank in the orchestra of the army, like I said, that's unknown. We better hedge our bets and presume that we rank very high, and that everything that we do is very meaningful. Because the truth of the matter is that the lowliest human being has tremendous impact. Impact that ripples, the ripple effects go far beyond them. But what I think is a very valuable lesson to take away from this whole idea is something that Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin says, that within our own personalities, okay, we often find that our greatest strength is our greatest weakness. It's the same trait, okay, that very often we rise to in our finest hour, that we can take that same trait and self-sabotage again and again and again. And it requires some introspection, it requires some self-knowledge, maybe it requires 10 years of analysis, I don't know exactly what it requires, right? But at some point in our lives we come to some degree of self-knowledge, and I think all of us at some point have this kind of epiphany, and we say, one second, I keep on doing this wrong, this wrong. I remember I was able to do that same kind of thing in a positive way, in a meaningful way, in a proactive way. That's something that I think we have to take away, because again, it's not just in the totality of where do I rank, where do you rank, okay? It's within our own makeup, okay? I don't know where I rank, but within the hand that I was dealt by God, by nature, by nurture, whatever you want to call it, I have something that I'm always struggling with, and it just seems to be that the greatest strength and the greatest weakness very often coalesce, or very often in the same vein, or the exact same personality trait. Okay. Before we get back to the Mishnah, I'm not presuming necessarily knowledge of the whole story of Bilaam as it appears in the Chumash. He does not have a weekly Torah parsha named after him. It's his partner in crime that gets top billing. For some reason, Balak. Balak was the king of Moab. Let me show you why Balak hired Bilaam. Take a look in your Sidurim again. There's something that we say in the morning, Sukkah D'Zimra, verses of praise. It's part of the Song of the Sea. Take a look on page 81. Okay, it's a little hard for me to point out the place here because it's not numbered, the lines. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indentations from the top.
Who was like?
It begins with the word, the line I'm looking for on page 81 begins with the word people. Peoples, I should say.
Heard?
Yes. Peoples heard. They were agitated. Convulsive terror gripped the dwellers of Philistia. New word, never heard that one before. Then the chieftains of Edom were confounded. Trembling gripped the powers of Moab. All the dwellers of Canaan dissolved. Okay, basically what they mean is this. When the news approached the rest of the ancient Near East about the miracles that had happened prior to and during the Exodus from Egypt, everybody said, that's it. I mean, wherever God wants to bring this, take me to your leader, resistance is futile, That was the basic attitude. More the resistance is futile. The greatest civilization, the greatest army, the greatest cavalry up until that point had been laid waste in the parting of the Sea of Reeds. The Egyptian army was drowned. No survivors. How are we going to put up any resistance that can resist this irresistible force? That was the basic notion. Parenthetically, as sages tell us that the nation of Amalek, the arch anti-Semites, kind of messed this up. The famous metaphor that when you have a boiling bathtub and some wild child decides to jump in, even though they get scalded, they walk out of the bath with the second-degree burns. Okay, people aren't so afraid to jump into the bath anymore. That was the metaphor for the utter terror that had gripped the other nations of the world. They would never dream of attacking the Israelites. But after Amalek, okay, maybe they got their nose bloodied, but they don't seem so indestructible anymore. But anyway, we have to understand this, that there's a 40-year time period that intervened between the exodus from Egypt and crossing the Jordan River and actually beginning to wage the wars to take possession of the land of Canaan. And just as there had been tremendous victories, military might exhibited by the exodus from Egypt, now towards the end of the 40 years, there were also mighty nations, in particular Sichon and Og, who had been defeated by the Jews just before what we would call today the east bank of the Jordan River. Moab was an ancient nation directly in that region, and it says that Balak, the king of Moab, saw what God had done to Sichon and Og, and he said, through natural efforts, there's no way I'm going to defeat the chosen people of this almighty Jewish God. Okay? I've got to try something a little supernatural. Natural means they're not going to help me. So, Balak had a hired gun or a verbal hitman called Bilaam. He said, we know about you that whomever you bless is blessed, and whomever you curse is cursed. A very interesting narrative where they talk about his prophecy and their sorcery. It says that the emissaries that Balak sent, he tried to make an alliance with Midian, and the emissaries that he sent to Mesopotamia to bring Bilaam were themselves sorcerers. And first Bilaam resists. He says, I can't transgress the word of God. I'm a prophet of God. I'm also a prophet of the Jewish God. He's not going to want me to do this. Stay overnight, I'll see what I can tell you in the morning. He sends them away. Balak sends another group of emissaries, higher ranking, a greater bribe. He sweetens the offer, raises the contract offer.
Is this in the Torah or the
Yes.
Gemara?
No. This is directly in the Torah.
Okay.
I'm not offering any commentary right now. This is in Parshas Balak. If you want, I'll show you the pages of the Living Torah after. I'm trying to synopsize it because we're as usual, we're short on time. So first Hashem tells him, don't go. I don't want you to go with these people. How can you curse a nation that I've blessed, that's been blessed? Can't do such a thing. Then overnight, Kaviyachal, God himself seems to be waffling. He says, okay, you want to go with them? Go with them, but don't say a word that I don't put in your mouth. Don't say anything that I don't direct you to say. And then there's the famous, for those of you who may have remembered my flyer for this series, you see a guy sitting on a donkey, right, with a prod in his hand. That's Bilaam. Okay, the famous story of the donkey of Bilaam squeezing his leg against the wall 3 times, and he keeps on beating the donkey. And then this remarkable miracle happens. The donkey opens his mouth and speaks to Bilaam. Why have you struck me 3 times? Okay. Now, many commentaries understand this to have literally occurred, like a lot of the other miracles of the Bible. The Rambam, Maimonides of Moreh Nevuchim, the guide to the perplex, said that this itself was a prophetic vision that Bilaam was having. Either way, almost everyone agrees that the message of the speaking donkey is that if God wants a donkey to be a spokesman, he can make a donkey be a spokesman too. I mean, don't be so full of yourself, Bilaam, that you've got the vision thing and you've got the speech, the rhetorical skills. Right? When the hour requires it, a donkey can speak the message of God as well. And all of a sudden, his eyes are opened up. It seems he had a lack of vision at that moment. The donkey notices an angel with an outstretched sword before Bilaam himself does. And again, he reiterates this ambiguous message from God. Go, don't go. How dare you go? Why'd you go with him? I told you not to go. And as soon as the angel says that, puts down the sword, free passage, go. Just remember, only speak what you're told to speak. There's a whole story, a complicated, I don't want to call it ceremony, I don't know exactly what to call it, but remember, we're dealing with supernatural warfare here, not the regular military tactics and strategy. There's the building of various altars and the sacrificing of various sacrifices. And each time sacrifices are brought and Bilaam seeks to curse the Jewish people, all of a sudden, much like the donkey that had its mouth miraculously opened, Bilaam is saying beautiful, lyrical, actually some of the most poetic passages in the entire Torah about the glory and the wonderful future of the Jewish people. He prophesies about the Messianic era. And every time he tries to curse, and he wants to curse, it doesn't work out. He always ends up blessing. Okay? We don't need to be experts at the entire blessings of Bilaam, but there's one that's very famous because it's been incorporated into the Siddur. Once again, it's right at the beginning of Shachris service. Ma tovu halacha Yaakov mishkanasecha Yisrael. How goodly are thy tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Those are not the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. They're not the words of King David. Those are the words of Bilaam. Right? So a lot of other beautiful, wonderful things about the Jewish people. That's probably the most famous of them. Okay, so that's the story in a nutshell of Bilaam. Now let's get to what our sages have to say of an analysis of what was wrong with Bilaam. Let's go back to that Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the 5th chapter, the 24th Mishnah. Give me a second, I'll give you the 22nd Mishnah, I'm sorry. Page 579. In about 10 minutes, I want you to turn on the AC in that room. Get a drink. There's also a package of honeydew. Bring it up, people should have healthy choices. Okay. Mishnah 22, page 579. Whoever has the following 3 traits is among the disciples of our forefather Abraham. And whoever has 3 different traits is among the disciples of the wicked Bilaam. Those who have a good eye, a humble spirit, and a meek soul are among the disciples of our forefather Abraham. Those who have an evil eye, an arrogant spirit, and a greedy soul are among the disciples of the wicked Bilaam. Okay, the rest of the Mishnah talks about the wages of sin or the wages of virtue. It's not the part of the Mishnah I really want to concentrate on right now. So let's define these traits. Again, it's the English translator here basically adhered to Rashi's Pshat. I'm going to be working again with the commentary on Pirkei Avos called the Derech Chaim, or the Maharal of Prague. So the first thing that the words in Hebrew are as follows. By Avram Avinu, by Abraham, it's called Ayin Tova, the good eye, Ruach Nemucha, a lowly Ruach. I'm not even going to bother to translate it because these are different dimensions of human spirituality. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama speak to different dimensions of the human soul. Ruach Nemucha, the Nefesh Shvala. Nefesh Shvala also seems to be like a lowly. Shafel and Namuch are almost synonymous words. I'll tell you the nuance and difference in a minute. What did Bilaam possess? And or people who have these traits are associated with coming from the school of Bilaam. Ayin Ra'ah, an evil eye. Ruach Gavoa, a ruach that's salient, that's high. The Nefesh Rechava, a nefesh that's expansive. Okay? So what do these mean? He associates these with three simple or one-word midos that elsewhere in Pirkei Avos is said are supposed to be the most nihilistic, self-destructive characteristics that a human being can possess. Kina, taiva, and kavod. Jealousy, lust, and vainglory, and the desire for honor. And he says each one of these speak to the fact that Bilaam was what we call a chasar. Bilaam was somebody who, despite his terrific spiritual endowments, was very needy and was very lacking. There was something about him that was unwholesome. And they're defined by these midas. What's kina? What's jealousy? Ayin hara. Okay? Everyone's heard of an ayin hara. Kena hara. Maybe one of us is a bubby, maybe one of us had a bubby or a zaidi who always said kena hara. You're such a darling, kena hara. That means the evil eye should not befall you. Okay? Some people write, it's superstition. What does that mean? What's an ayin hara? What's an evil eye? All right? I'm not going to go into at length tonight into the sources or the roots of this quote-unquote superstition. But suffice it to say that it's clear in Pirkei Avos over here that we describe this as a personality trait. So if you don't want to buy into the superstitious part of it, buy into the fact that it speaks to a way of defining jealousy. Jealousy is, what does an evil eye mean? Elsewhere in Mishnah Pirkei Avos it's called sarei eye, people with a narrow eye. Basically what it means is when you look at something and there's a certain bitterness, there's a certain stinginess of spirit, it's not so much that I want it, it's that the other person doesn't deserve it. Kina is about jealousy. I have a whole series on jealousy, but to cut to the chase, jealousy is about position, not about possession. Jealousy is the other person is occupying a position that by rights, justly, I deserve. It's not enough for me to have the same as the other person. That's not even the point. Right? The point is they don't deserve it. I have a class on this title, Why do good things happen to horrible people? That's really the fundamental idea of jealousy. So whenever a person is jealous incorrectly, which is 99% of the time, people are jealous incorrectly, okay? It's obviously speaking to a lack of stature. I feel diminished. Right? It's not just I lack a certain possession. I lack my rightful position in society and the hierarchy. Right? I'm lacking. I'm very needy. I'm not wholesome. I haven't achieved my potential. Gosh darn it, it's somebody else's fault. Right? That's 95% of the time. And it's a very destructive force. It's self-destructive. It's destructive to others. Again, the commentaries basically have two approaches to why Balak thought that Bilaam would be an effective hired gun with cursing. Right? One, the more straightforward, if you will, rationalist approach was that what we say about God, Kel Zayim B'chol Yom. God rages every day. And primarily his greatest power, and this explains a little bit maybe why Balak sent emissaries who were masters of the occult arts, he was a great astrologer. He knew how to time things where if he would get a word in, right, that was the moment of divine wrath, and that's the moment where he could kind of channel divine destructive powers. That's the more rational of the approaches. The other approach is that it wasn't so much what he was saying, but the way he was looking at things. All right? And why it's so remarkable that he looks at the Jewish people, and the words that flow out of his mouth are so gracious and so kindly and so complimentary. Matovu Alach Yaakov, how goodly he attends Jacob, and so on. Kavod, the Ruach Kavoah. I say part of this waffling was not just waffling. He was manipulating, he was insulted. He didn't like, it's like if you want to make a great diplomatic faux pas, right? A head of state, yeah. Let's say Putin would die tomorrow, right? And the Obama administration would send to the funeral the under ambassador to the Nicaraguan consulate. Okay, it would be a great diplomatic faux pas. If the president himself cannot show up, for such a state funeral, at the very least, you've got to send the vice president and the first lady. Right? He was very upset with the rank of the emissaries that Balak had sent. And that's literally in the verses of the Torah itself. It says that the next time Balak sent a mission to Bilaam, he sent Sarim, Rabbi, he sent a larger mission, and higher ranking people in his government he sent to go fetch Bilaam. So this guy was an ego tripper. He was hung up on Kavod. He was hung up on the honor and the glory that was going to be bestowed on him. In a fit of frustration, when all the curses backfire, Balak, the king of the Moabites, says to Bilaam, if I can find it quickly, I'll say it. If not, I'm just going to say it from memory. Okay? Furious at Bilaam, Balak struck his hands together. I brought you to curse my enemies, but you blessed them 3 times instead. Now go home as fast as you can. I promise to honor you, but God won't let you get any honor. Okay, so a lot of it was not about just the monetary remuneration. It wasn't how fat a contract this contract killing was supposed to be. It was about prestige and honor. Okay? You wanted honor. I was ready to do you honor. Your God has prevented you from receiving the honor that I was going to give you. So he was after kavod. He was after honor. And this is what we mean by ruach kavoah, a salient spirit, an exalted spirit, high spirit. Why does this speak to lack? Why does it speak to his unwholesomeness? So here the Maharal explains the imperfection of having things that are extra, that are superfluous. Just the Maharal doesn't say, but I seem to recall a famous quote from Michelangelo. Somebody saw him chiseling away at one of his, I don't know if it was his David or his Pieta, one of his great sculptures. And the fellow says, your work is really beautiful. I can't get over all that you put into it. So he says, you don't understand sculpture. In sculpture, it's not what you put into it, it's what you take away from it. Okay? I look at the block of granite, and I see David there, but I've got to reveal David. I've got to take away everything that's superfluous until I'm left with the perfect David. And that's how Michelangelo explained his art. We have a concept in halacha. Okay? Kol yaser kanatul dami. Anything that's extra is as if it's absent. Case in point. There are 18 internal defects. I'm tongue-tied already. 18 internal defects which can render a kosher animal what we call treifa. Okay? Traditionally, the only ones that we examine for are imperfections in the lungs, but there are other internal injuries or internal defects that can render an animal to be treif. One of them is a lack of a kidney. If an animal is supposed to have 2 kidneys, it only has one, and I'll get to that in a second, so that renders it treif. If an animal has 3 kidneys, it's also treif. Kol yesa cannot dami. If it's superfluous, it's as if it's absent. It's as if there's nothing there. So very often the egomaniacal people of the world, they're trying to stand out, they're trying to be salient, they're trying to be taller than others, whether in physical stature, whether they got elevator shoes on, or other ways that make them salient, that make them rise above the rest. Okay? That itself is a certain lack. That itself shows a lack of comfort in one's own skin. You need outside validation. You need covet. What's covet? Testimonial dinners, plaques, I don't know what it is, a good compliment, whatever it is, right? But you're not just satisfied to be yourself. And you're not just satisfied alone with yourself. You constantly need that outside validation, that outside reinforcement. That's a needy person. That's somebody who's not complete, who's incomplete. And finally, nefesh rechava, an expansiveness of the spirit, that speaks to lust, that speaks to taiva. That's possession, not position. He wanted a lot of money. He wanted all the things that a lot of money can buy. And we all know the other famous aphorism in Pirkei Avos, Ezeu Asher Hasamech B'Chelkei. Who is the truly rich person? Someone who is satisfied with their lot. Somebody who, throughout their lives, their theme song is, I can't get no satisfaction. I don't care how much money they have in the bank. There's a certain poverty of spirit to such people. Okay, they may be rich, but they're not living richly. If you feel I've got everything I need, there's a certain richness to that. Okay? So all of these things speak to the neediness and the lack of wholesomeness of Bilaam Rasha. On the contrary, though, the greatness of Avraham Avinu is the opposite of all these things. We know that Avraham Avinu was renowned for being a Gomel Chesed, the tent of Abraham, open on four sides. He took in wayfarers, served meals. And the idea was, he wasn't some kind of, ivory tower, pointy-headed intellectual. I found the truth. I had this great epiphany, this great revelation of monotheism. Let's keep it for myself and my family. He wanted to spread the truth all around, whether we're talking about material well-being, whether we're talking about spiritual well-being. He had a tremendous generosity of spirit, Avraham Avinu. He was a giver, not a taker. He wanted to give and give and give to others. An ayin tova. Not somebody who thought, well, if I give away so much, what will be left for me? If there are tens of thousands of monotheists in the world, what makes me special anymore? This was not his way of thinking. He had a generosity of spirit. He was willing to give away and not begrudge others their success. As far as being an egomaniac, Avraham Avinu uttered the famous words when he was praying for the people of Sodom, Anochi ofar ve'efer, I am dust and ashes. As far as having an expansiveness of spirit, of being greedy or lusty, it says that after the war with Sodom, so Malki Tzedek, Melech Shalom, Malki Tzedek, the king of Salem, wanted to give him a tremendous amount of booty, which, according to the ancient rules of warfare anyway, he had earned. It was coming to him. And his response was, I swear a solemn oath, lest I take a thread or a bootstrap from all of this booty, lest anybody say, I enriched Abraham. I'm not interested. I have enough. I'm satisfied. I'm not a needy person. Thank God I have all I need. I don't need any of the spoils of war. So, if he didn't want what he had earned, so to speak, what was really coming to him, he certainly didn't lust after and desire things that didn't belong to him. Again, the exact opposite of Bilaam. Finally, he says, when he's talking about this idea of Abraham being the patriarch of the Jewish people, and Bilaam being as the preeminent prophet, as being the head of the nations of the world, he says, yes, that's a comparison. That's something that they hold in common. But let's look at the contrast, and the contrast is really derived from what's called the Notrican formula by deconstructing the very names. Seder tells the name Avraham is to be interpreted as Av Hamon Goyim, the father of a multitude of nations. Okay, we know that besides the Jewish people, Abraham is the patriarch of the Arab people. Right? He had a son, Yishmael. Yishmael is the patriarch of all Arab people. I'm not talking right now about religion, I'm talking about an ethnicity. Right? Arabs are descended from Abraham as well. We have a tradition also, Abraham took in his old age, he took another wife called Keturah, and it says that he had several children by Keturah. He sent them to the east. Right? We also have a tradition that many of the Oriental peoples may be descended from Abraham. And even if we're not talking about biology, genealogy, our sages tell us that what we mean when we say Avraham Avinu is Av Hamon Goyim is because Abraham is the parent of all righteous converts to Judaism, who can come from just about any nation on earth. Right? It just so happens that when a Ger Tzedek, a righteous convert, gets called to an Aliyah, to the Torah, he's called Ben Avram, the son of Abraham. Right? Abraham was the spiritual trailblazer. No, let's not forget that Abraham was not born a Jew. Abraham became a Jew later in life. And that's the paradigm for conversion to Judaism. So, whether we're talking about an Aliyah to the Torah, whether we're talking about how to write a ksuba, right? In strictly legal documents as well, a ger or giora is a convert, a male convert, a female convert. They're known as Ben or Bas Avram, the son of the daughter of Abraham and Sarah, as the case may be. If you have to make a Mishaberach Chola for them, they're sick. You always make the Mishaberach based on your mother's name, not your father's name. So then they're the children of Sarah. Okay, so Avraham Avinu is a father. He's a parent. He's a life giver. He lends mitzius. He lends being to others. Bilaam, on the other hand, his name is deconstructed as Balaam, a swallower of a nation. He wanted to utterly destroy, he wanted to utterly lay waste to the Jewish people a spiritual, I shouldn't say spiritual, a supernatural kind of Holocaust. Supernatural, Iranian nuclear bomb. When Balak hired Bilaam, he wanted the utter annihilation. I want you to put a hit on this whole nation. Not on a few of them, not on the military leadership. I want the Jews wiped off the face of the earth. That was Balak's plan. So Bilaam, that's the opposite of fatherhood. That's the opposite of parenthood, I should say. Parenthood, fathers and mothers lend their children their very existence. And Bilaam wanted to rob the Jewish people of their existence. And I can now read the end of the Mishnah. How are the disciples of our forefather Abraham different from the disciples of the wicked Bilaam? The disciples of our forefather Abraham enjoy the fruits of their good deeds in this world and inherit the world to come. As it is said, to cause those who love me to inherit an everlasting possession, the world to come. It doesn't read that well in the English. The Hebrew is lahanchil laohavai yesh. Okay? Anyone know enough Hebrew to know what the word yesh means? No. What?
There is.
Existence, yesh. How do you say creation ex nihilo in Hebrew? Something out of nothing. Yesh me'ayin. Okay? Lahanchil laohavai yesh. The inheritance, the legacy of Abraham is yesh. There exists. There's something here. You exist. You're here. Now do something about it. but that's what it means to be a nation builder, to be a patriarch or a matriarch. Bilaam, on the other hand, was about destruction, was about nihilism, was about robbing things that did exist already of their very existence. I just want to end, obviously, it's a very big topic. I gave a luck and a schmeck to all these, dirty, rotten scoundrels, these Bible villains of the Bible, and probably in the process ended up distorting a few things. I just want to end about Bilaam with a cautionary lesson. Again, we're trying, throughout the series, not just to demonize the bad guys, but to walk away with something positive, possibly in our own lives. Again, Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin says an amazing thing about Bilaam. All this vacillation, I will go with you, I won't go with you, is an amazing thing. The Gemara says, chutzpah afilu klape shmaya mahani. Chutzpah is such a powerful thing, sometimes it helps even against heaven. It was a chutzpah for Bilaam to tell the emissaries of Balak, stay with me overnight. We'll see what happens in the morning. Let me sleep on it. God told you He doesn't want you to go with them. What kind of a chutzpah is that to tell them to wait overnight? You should have sent them packing immediately. God says no, it's no. This isn't, right? Not schizophrenic over it. It's a genuine, honest to goodness prophet of God. He sees, he hears, he's got the vision there, right? And yet there was all this waffling. And you see that the waffling helped. And the end God says, okay, go, but don't say the wrong thing. Right? That's what the Gemara means when it says chutzpah helps, even versus heaven. Sometimes if you're very bold, if you're very brazen, it can help. But the bottom line is, whose side is he on, so to speak? Bilaam. He claims to be a prophet of God. He talks a very pious talk. If you read the biblical narrative, it says, I'll never be able to say anything unless God puts the words in my mouth, and the whole time he's fighting against that. He wants to say his independent curses. Right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He ends up being able to say, just like the donkey, only that which God put directly in his mouth. Right? But what's all this waffling? And Rabbi Tzadok says an amazing thing, and call me a bit of a heretic, but I'm not super fond of a lot of the literature that you find in the Judaic stores today, where people tell, usually these autobiographical stories of tremendous divine providence. Okay, you see, God was always there. When I needed God to be there for me, God was there. Sometimes it's true. He says, but Rabbi Tzadok says, you see one amazing lesson from the story of Bilaam. Don't presume that when things are going, as we say in English, geschmiert, things are just going well lubricated, everything seems to be falling into place. Wow, I've got God on my side. Okay? As Bob Dylan put it very, very bitterly and succinctly, in 1939, the Nazis had God on their side. The Blitzkrieg was an unprecedented military success. Everything was going great. He says it doesn't necessarily prove a thing, because we have a plank in our theological platform. B'derech she'adam rotza leilech malichan osa. The way a person wants to go, that is how that person is led. God will manipulate providence, but that doesn't mean it's consistent with his divine will. Doesn't mean it's his agenda. You want something really bad, we all know, be careful what you wish for. You want something really bad, I'll lead you that way. And a person can talk it into himself, a sign from heaven. This must be the will of God. He wants me to go this way. And in a nutshell, I think what's very important is, and I think it's a hair's breadth of difference, I think it's a nuance, okay? But I think it can be the difference that separates a Nazi from a true servant of God. And that is, the point is not to be thinking about whether or not God is on my side. The point is to be thinking, am I on God's side? Right. Find out what God's side is. Find out what the will of God is, and then manipulate your desires accordingly. And then you'll be led in the right way in life. But if you've got your own agenda, the fact that things may be going like a hot knife through butter doesn't prove a thing. So says Rabbi Tzadok, and that's one of the great lessons of the Bilaam story. Okay, ladies and gents, that's it for tonight. That's it for the series. There's a good collation in the next room. And like I said, if you didn't at the beginning of the class, there are flyers on the